Thank you, Andreas. So indeed, I will speak today about Jewish Siberia, synagogue architecture in the frontier landscape. And as I revealed previously, Siberian Jews is an exotic topic. So that's why I would like explain in one sentence how I'm connected to Siberia. In 2015, the Center for Jewish Art arranged the field trip to Siberia, and we members of the team are here, Dr. Vladimir Lenin, Dr. Katrin Kessler, and me. So in 2015, we made our way from Tomsk in the Western Siberia to Vladivostok in the Russian Far East. So 16 cities on our way. We documented synagogues, Jewish cemeteries, Jewish houses, Jewish ritual objects in museums. And my interest in Siberia dates back to 2015. And for our lecture, we'll need several basic facts about Siberia. Let's start from the geographic scope. So Siberia is this land that spans from the Ural Mountains to the Pacific Ocean and accounts for almost 80% of the Russian land area. And the majority of the population is located on the southern border. And Siberia became part of the Russian Empire as a result of expansion, conquest that started in the end of the 16th century and effectively ended up in 1860 with the establishment of Vladivostok on the shore of the Sea of Japan. And for this lecture, we'll need just more 3 facts. So before the conquest, Siberia was populated with numerous indigenous people, and the Russian authority brought new white civilized or European people to these lands. These were mostly military, peasants, and exiles, convicts. So this last group will interest us the most. And for this 3 centuries, from late 16th till the late 19th, Siberia became important economic center. And by the end of the 19th century, we already see the construction of the railroad, and major Siberian cities at that moment have all indication of regular cultural and economical life that we know in cities. So it's just because I realized at some point that Siberia is so much associated with snow and camps that sometimes people just don't think that there was cities, universities, theaters, newspapers there. And the very last thing we'll need to know about Siberia is the concept of frontier. That is a good way to think about these lands. And it's very clear that frontier, the first name that comes up is Frederick Turner and his frontier thesis. So this meeting point between savagery and civilization that happened in North America and resulted in this unique American character as Frederick Turner saw this. And it's interesting that Siberia indeed was compared with America already in the 19th century. It was Russian America, as so it was nicknamed so. But today we will speak about frontier in much more contemporary terms, about contact zone where diverse people of diverse ethnic and religious groups meet and transformed. This is one aspect of frontier concept. So let's see how it can be applied to Siberia. Starting from the 19th century, we see a number of testimonies that people living in Siberia so these descendants of military peasants, convicts brought from the European part of Russia, don't see themselves anymore as Russians. They see themselves as Siberians. So they declare that they are these brave, straightforward people, that proud people, morally superior to those that were left behind in the in the European part of Russia, and that would be important for our further talk. And now let's just finally speak about Jews in Siberia. How did they come up in this picture? Mostly is convicts and exiles. The only detail is that Jews started to arrive to Siberia as convicts and exiles only from the late 18th century. So from the moment then Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was petitioned, as previously Russian Empire just didn't have any, officially didn't have any Jewish subjects. The second group of Jews that arrived to Siberia in the 19th century were Jews brought by military draft, so from 1827 and later. And the last group of Jews that arrived to Siberia were independent settlers. And numerically, they were the most insignificant group for two major reasons. The mobility of Jews in the Russian Empire was limited to the Pale of Settlement, so Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine of today, and Siberia was never part of the Pale. And the second reason, in those Jews that had a right to leave the Pale of Settlement and to reside in the interior Russia were not allowed to settle in Siberia. There was an explicit prohibition from 1837 for Jews to settle in Siberia. So with all these limitations, by the end of the 19th century, the first Russian census registered 35,000 Jews in Siberia. So less than 1%. But as it happens many times, statistic is misleading. And if you would, so the majority of Siberian residents were peasants and people living in rural areas. But Jews who were also allocated initially to rural areas and villages, with years moved to major Siberian cities. And by the end of the 19th century, they were the second largest group ethnically and religious group after Russians in almost every Siberian city. And here I took Irkutsk, the unofficial capital of Eastern Siberia, just as an example. By the end of the 19th century, it had 50,000 residents, and Jews were 7% of town residents, and Jewish merchants accounted for 24% of local entrepreneurs. And so this is very typical picture. And now let's come back for a second to this idea about Siberians being non-Russians, being better people than Russians. Let's see how Jews felt in, among these Siberians. We have lots of testimonies, memoirs, travel notes speaking about Siberian Jews. They were exotic people even back in the 19th century. Here is a quote from Tfila, Jewish businessman who traveled through Siberia in 1894. That's what he writes. I hear them, meaning Siberian Jews, saying in the pride and stoutness of heart, we are the Siberians, Siberians and Siberians. Every question you ask, every conversation you have, they declare and stress their Siberianness. And the creme de la creme add to that their privilege. Also our ancestors and the ancestors of our ancestors were Siberians. And it's an interesting twist. So that means that Jews that mostly were brought to Siberia involuntarily quickly joined this local Siberian identity and felt at home in Siberia, spoke about themselves as proud people, better people, but in this case, than Jews living in the European part of Russia. So they were known for their arrogance towards these poor Lithuanian Jews. And we see that Siberian Jewry is seen as a separate entity. they present themselves as a separate entity, and they are seen as a separate entity by visitors, by travelers, and even by many scholars who research this subject today. So our question for today will be if we can see this self-perception materialized in local architecture, in local synagogue architecture. So let's have a look at several buildings as we know them. As you may guess, those that arrived to Siberia in the late 18th century, early 19th century, and were allocated to villages. So had their first synagogues in villages, in private houses. And these were in no way different from dwelling houses that existed in Siberia at that moment. Probably something like this that we still had standing today in Nerchinsk. But as soon as the Jewish communities felt more confident, got funds, as Siberia was the land of luck seekers, and many succeeded. So the Jewish community had funds already by the mid 19th century, and we see that first synagogues, freestanding synagogues, appeared in Siberian villages and cities. And first that was built is something that comes back to the patterns that were known to Jews from the Pale of Settlements. So mostly split-type synagogues, the lofty hall in the eastern part and the western part divided into floors, so the entrance and the women's section above the entrance. But as soon as, clearly this is something that you would find in the Pale of Settlement, and still can find several synagogues like this standing. So, but as soon as social and economic standing of Jewish community was bettering, as it was not only by the end of the 19th century the second largest group in almost every Siberian city, it was also the part of the local elites. So we see this desire from the Jewish part to build something that would represent them as a community, not just an adequate place for prayer, but an architecturally notable building. And I brought this postcard of a very dubious quality, just because this is the only picture that shows us two synagogues standing next to each other, one by one. The old wooden synagogue built by the Jewish community in Chita, and the new masonry synagogue that replaced the old one in 1907. And you can see the difference, from this traditional pattern to this modern synagogue with cupola, very dominant in the local landscape, and local Christian community was aware of this dominance. We see all kind of comments and in local newspapers about this white building of synagogue dominating all the town. And let's see what were the models that were taken by Siberian Jews. Then they were constructing these modern synagogues. And the first in the mid-19th century, then first modern synagogues appeared in Siberia. We already have several acculturated Jewish groups in Russia, and some of them already built their synagogues with this goal to present themselves. But it seems that there was very limited knowledge of these synagogues in Siberia. And so every community is searching for a model. And the most striking example is this wooden synagogue in Omsk, built in 1974. And Dr. Vladimir Levin argued that the model behind this building is Leopoldstädter Temple in Vienna. And I do agree with that. As all of you know, Leopoldstädter Temple in Vienna was a very important model in Austro-Hungarian Empire. But the synagogue in Omsk seems to be the only synagogue in Russia that took this model. And we also see at this period that such buildings erected in major administrative centers of Siberia become local models, and smaller communities in villages, in smaller towns, accept these patterns and build something to something similar. But in the end of the in the 1890s, the model changes, and the main model for the Siberian communities from that moment, so 1890s, is the Choral Synagogue in St. Petersburg, itself modeled after Berlin, but it's a different topic. So here are the major synagogues in Siberia modeled after St. Petersburg model, St. Petersburg Synagogue. And here is the combination of three elements, Neo-Moorish styles. The Neo-Moorish style that became very dominant from the inauguration of synagogue in St. Petersburg, dome about the entrance, and turrets. So the every community modeled these three elements, omitted others, but we see also in local newspapers that the inauguration of these synagogues in Siberia were very often commented. So the local journalists emphasized that these synagogues were modeled after the synagogue in St. Petersburg. And clearly it was something that was told, they heard from the local communities. Just let me show you a good example how this synagogue in Omsk, I already mentioned, built after the Leopoldstädter in Vienna, was remodeled after the fire of 1896. And here we'll see that this Viennese fashion was already put aside, and the building received the dome above the entrance. And pay attention on these elements above the windows. So here you can see how the Omsk building is quoting the synagogue in St. Petersburg. But actually there were many ways to show how the local Siberian community refers to these elite groups in St. Petersburg. For example, in Chita, the local architect Gavril Nikitin took as a model not the synagogue erected, but the competition design for the Choral Synagogue in St. Petersburg. And here you also can see this decoration elements above the side entrances quoted very clearly. And the last synagogue for today will be synagogue in Achinsk, not just because I find it really impressive. It's a very small city, even today. But it also shows that some communities in 1907 still preferred not St. Petersburg, but Central European models. So Achinsk was modeled after the synagogue in Strasbourg, and designs were published in Architectural Encyclopedia, Russian Architectural Encyclopedia. And with all this, back to the question that I asked in the very beginning, is this Jewish Siberian identity of Siberian Jews as proud people, brave people, people that are so different from Russian Jews. was materialized in architecture in any way. And it seems that the answer is no, or mostly no, as we see that the first synagogues were modeled after something that was known from the Pale settlement, and at the moment then the community felt confident enough to present itself towards the non-Jews or somehow direct notable building. They took as models something brought from Central Europe or from the Russian capitals, and this is a pattern that we know from almost any Jewish community in Russia beyond the Pale. So this was the way the synagogue architecture developed in so that every modernized and acculturated Jewish groups searched for a model in capital or European city. So it seems that Jewish architecture in Siberia that was very dominant and located in the city center and was the matter of proud for local Jews was still developing in the same trend as the synagogue architecture in Russia beyond the Pale in general. So that's it for today. Thank you.